Hello everyone, good day to all of you. I recently received a comment asking if I could rank all of the parts that I put on my MR556 build, and also I've just been receiving kind of some questions and comments in general on how I set this up, so I was hoping to answer them all today in this video on an overview of my MR556 build right here. So starting with just a little note that I have already done a lot of part-specific videos on what I have on this rifle, so as I'm going through this video, I'll have up on YouTube, I'll have the links up on the screen, and just if you check the description down below, I'll have the links as well to everything there. Not every single part that I'll talk about has a video, but a lot of the more interesting ones do. So if you have any more questions on those in specific, then by all means do check those out. And if you have any other questions on anything else, feel free to leave those in the comments later. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. First, actually not talking about a part per se specifically, but to understand why I chose certain parts on here, discussing the use case itself. So it's very important first to understand that the MR556, its concept, its usage from HK it's truly in the name. MR556, which stands for match rifle, and then 556 of course, because that's the caliber. For me, the reason I got this rifle wasn't really to do precision work, although I will say that it is phenomenally accurate and precise. I actually wanted this for a home defense rifle. I was looking at the time when I first got into this to replace my SLR 104 FR, which is in 545, which was my previous home defense rifle. The reason for that isn't that anything ever went wrong with it, more so something went wrong with 545 itself, as you know, on the market. And if you're into that at all, it is really hard to get quality ammo for that, and I'm really running low on my stocks. It's hard to find not even just quality, just any ammo for 545 in general now. Wanted something in 556, obviously that is by far the easiest rifle cartridge to get here. And I weighed a lot of different options, which no real point in going into all of them, but you know, MCX, a bunch of different ARs, and then ultimately I thought for my use case that the MR556 would be best with a few changes, which is how I arrived where I am now. So do understand that. I think that out of the package, the MR556 is certainly best suited as a match rifle. You can still certainly press it into use as a home defense rifle, but my biggest complaint with the regular MR556 is the unlined barrel, which phenomenally accurate, but I prefer chrome lined, or at least, you know, something nitrided. That way it wouldn't be as much of a concern with having to really maintain it and keep it really clean for it to keep running properly. So starting with that barrel, that is by far the most important change I would say for making this a home defense rifle. As I said, this is chrome lined. Nefarious Arms barrel, they make a lot of different variants. In my case, I went with a 16.5 MR556 profile barrel, just chrome lined. I do like the regular barrel that HK has, just, you know, that was pretty much the only change I wanted. I don't mind the length either. Yeah, it does get kind of lengthy with the suppressor, which I will discuss as well later, but it's still manageable even for home defense. Another change I made, actually underneath the hood this time, is the NA5 gas block. This is an adjustable gas block, again, also from Nefarious Arms. With the regular vented gas block that comes with the MR556, it's actually not too bad to shoot suppressed, and by far, even then, it's still way better than shooting a DI gun or internal piston gun. But this NA5 gas block is great. One part I would say that is probably not worth it, just from my experience, is the Waffenberg gas block. I had one of those on here prior to switching to this NA5 gas block, and I just really didn't like it. The main issue for me is it just flat out didn't work, because I do have this SLH762 suppressor, which is a flow-through, reduced back pressure, and I just couldn't get any of the settings to work on that Waffenberg. So if you want to get a regular conventional suppressor and you want to use that Waffenberg, it'll probably work completely fine for you, at least as far as functioning. Some other issues I had with the Waffenberg was it was constantly gumming up, kind of just a design flaw that it was really hard to turn even after just a couple of rounds, less than a mag, and it would be pretty much impossible to turn the adjustment knob. That is not something I ran into ever with this NA5. I have over 1,000 rounds with the NA5 on here, and just the other day I tried turning it from normal to suppressed again, because I was doing a little bit of testing with this unsuppressed, although I normally do shoot it suppressed. But yeah, it was easy to turn and absolutely no issues. It's a very good gas block. And another issue, actually major issue I had with the Waffenberg was the excess gas was actually venting off to the side. And unfortunately for me, I like to grip right here, which is right where the gas block is, and also right where the Waffenberg was jetting. So I would get a crazy amount of just hot gas in my hand every time I was shooting, which, yeah, very, very uncomfortable. So I would definitely not recommend the Waffenberg. Moving to the next biggest different part on here is I'm not actually using an MR556 lower. As you can see right here, this lower receiver is actually an ADM4, which I did get remarked. You can see, I can understand why you might think that's weird because it's an ADM, it's not an HK. So my reasoning for this is I was going for a G95 inspired build, which is a 416A7. It has the same ambi controls as a 416A5. And at the time when I did this, it was really hard to get any of the ambi parts. Fast forward to now, I can get the ambi parts, and there is a clone lower from STS Tactical, which I might check out at some point. We'll see. But back then when I did this, this was kind of the best I could do to get those ambi features. It doesn't have the right, not perfect profile. It's pretty close. I understand some purists do hate that. It's fine for me. Like I said, I was more so wanting it for the functional usage. I will say that having these ambi controls, they're really nice when you're in prone, or obviously if you're actually using it left-handed, quite solid. Furthermore, this also has a regular AR-15 magwell profile, which the MR556 does not, which just allows for a little bit more compatibility with mags. What I read was that the Gen 2 P mags had issues in the MR556 lowers, so just avoiding all that, absolutely no problems with this and any types of mags. And to just address really quick the remarking itself, I had this all remarked and reanodized at the same time from Black Ops Defense, and there's some nice just clone markings here on the upper, and they charge the same amount whether you remark everything or you just remark one thing. So I thought if I'm paying the same amount, I may as well just get the lower remarked as well, even though it's not perfect. Like I said, it's ADM, not HK, but yeah, why not when I'm paying the same thing anyway, right? So those are what I would say are the biggest key changes that I did to the rifle. Just looking at most of the other parts now, just kind of going rear to front for the rest of these things. Lunar Concepts, contour sling, Rhodesian brushstroke. I do like this camo pattern, very good sling. This contour does help to keep it a bit higher on your shoulder, among some other benefits. I did also a full video on this as well, if you are interested in it. It's pretty similar to the Slingster, if you are familiar with that one, but personally I think it's a little bit better. I have this on a direct threaded ambi GG&G end plate, which is fairly similar to the actual one from HK. Down here, I've got the adaptive grip, by far the most comfortable grip I've used for ARs. One thing I did notice on this, so again, I did a full video on this and said pretty much the same thing. I really love this grip, and I still do. One issue I've had recently, however, is after using this for a bit, it does seem my storage cap here has loosened up. I will say that the storage cap sits on here overall. Even from the start, it sat looser than on the old V7 grips, and occasionally I've had this fall out. Luckily, I've caught it every time that it's either almost fallen out or has fallen out entirely at the range, but that's a little bit of a concern. And when I start taking this out for hunting season and all that, because I do use this for hunting too, I might just take that out altogether or find some alternative way to really secure it, because yeah, this thing wants to fly out sometimes when you're shooting. Moving up from there, I have a 416A5 safety selectors on a House Manufacturing 90-degree throw. I'm going to be replacing this with one of their MR95 safety axles whenever they release them. I really like 45-degree throws a lot better, but I do like the safety selectors from HK. I do like that they're polymer. They look kind of cool as well, and also they're roll pinned on, so these are kind of indestructible. They're not going to unthread necessarily like a set screw one potentially could. Up here on the charging handle, I have a Geissele Government. I really like the profile of the Geissele Government charging handle. I like that it's more rounded on the edges compared to their Super one, which can get a little bit more snagged on gear. One complaint I do have with this, which I've noticed on every single upper, because I have several of these charging handles, so every combination of charging handle, every combination of upper, these are just kind of wobbly. So these don't do a great job of keeping gas out of your face, which they're kind of supposed to. They have a little fence here in the back kind of for that purpose, but not really an issue on this because it's external piston. Most of the gas is going away from you here, but on the DI guns that I've shot with this charging handle, yeah, this kind of likes to go back because it's loose and kind of come out here just a little bit more than it should. Moving a bit forward and down now, I'm using a Schmeisser 2-stage trigger. I absolutely love these triggers. They are a really smooth, trigger just all the way throughout the first and second stage. Nice minimal reset. I actually like these better than the Geissleys. When I first got this trigger, I actually didn't have any experience with Geissle triggers. Now I do actually own a Geissle, and I do think this is a much better trigger than the Geissle. One other feature I do like on this is you can, as you heard, so hammer has been dropped. You can still put it on safe, fire, etc. It can work regardless of the hammer position. So I do like that. I always like being able to put the rifle onto safe regardless of how the hammer is. It's not the biggest issue in the world either way, but just my own personal preference. The only complaint I can have with this trigger is through no fault of its own, but it's a major complaint, is you can't get these anymore. I have 2 of these that I picked up through Polinar Tactical a while ago now. I'm not actually sure. It's been a while, but they don't stock those anymore. That was the only place I was aware of that actually would ship to the US. And I believe the EU has changed some export regulations as well. So kind of currently, as far as I'm aware, impossible to get these, which really sucks because I do want to get more of these triggers. Actually moving a little bit further back, but moving further up here on the upper receiver. I'm using a Strike Industries Forward Assist, one of their lightweight ones. I just think they look kind of cooler and they save a marginal amount of weight. It's pretty much negligible, but I just figured may as well. Like I said, doesn't really matter either way, but just kind of something I wanted to do on there. One other change I do think is beneficial to do on an MR556 is I did put a non-locking takedown pin on here, so that way I don't need to have the tools on me to field strip this. You can just do it just like a regular AR, just pop it out. Now this one I have is a V7 titanium pin, which is actually still pretty tight, but like I said, it doesn't require tools. It's just still a little bit annoying. Talking a little bit about the internals now. For the buffer assembly, everything back there, I'm just using the regular MR556 416 stuff. So the 416 buffer, the 416 spring, which is not actually required. You don't need it to run it. I did test this before with just a carbine buffer and spring in it. It runs fine. It's maybe a little bit more sharp on recoil though, especially because the spring, however, is significantly heavier on the HK version. So it does kind of help to balance out this whole system, but it's not absolutely necessary if you just need the rifle to run. Looking at the bolt carrier now, I am mostly running a regular bolt carrier here. Now one thing on the MR556 is you do have to use an MR223 or MR556 carrier, but the bolts themselves are completely interchangeable with the 416s. And in my case, I am actually using an HK 416A5 bolt. And there's truly no difference between the 416 bolts and the MR series bolts, save for the serial number, which is an 88 for the 416 designation, just rather than the MR series designation. One other different part I am using is I'm actually using a roller cam pin from POF rather than the regular one that came from HK. These types of cam pins are supposed to help reduce the wear in the upper receiver. I don't really have a sample to compare it to without one, but I will say that just from my experience from shooting ARs that don't have a either a roller cam pin like this one or a Lantac, which I was using before, it does seem like these do help to reduce the wear. I just started using this roller cam pin. Prior to this, like I said, I was using the Lantac one, so I'm not sure if either of these are necessarily more or less effective than the other, but either of them do seem to help a little bit. But I will note, if you're wanting to put this POF roller cam pin on a regular DI gun, you technically can, but you need to take out your gas key. So practically, you probably don't want to do that. The Lantac, however, will fit in those, so something to keep in mind there. If you have a piston, though, it works totally fine, because obviously that doesn't get in the way here. And one thing I do like about this POF pin is they do write on here their patent number. And it's not that I necessarily care what their patent number is per se, but I do like this because I can use this to determine which way I put it into the bolt carrier, which just helps to make sure it wears evenly. Something I learned from School of the American Rifle. Okay, got this put together. So now looking at the sights that I have on here. So using a EOTech EXPS 3.2 on a Unity riser, and then for my backup iron sights, I'm just using HK's set. One thing about these HK iron sights is they are lower than your regular AR iron sights, and the reason for that is because the 416 uppers, the MR556 uppers, all of these sit quite a bit higher. The rail itself is, I think it was, if I recall correctly, 3/8 inch higher than your regular AR. So just keep that in mind. These are lower, so it kind of compensates, and then this ends up being a pretty regular AR iron sight height. Of course, this does sit a bit higher than it would otherwise, but personally I find this to be a quite comfortable height with the riser. And this also allows me to use a magnifier whenever I want to, one of those nice flip to center magnifiers with the Unity mounts. One thing nice also about the backup iron sight system, talking about magnifiers, is that this is actually QD, so I can just pop this out and then just QD the magnifier on and it's good to go. And I have tested that, and these do return to 0 every time, so they're well made with that. Moving forward now to the handguard. What I'm using on here is a Geissele Mark 15 SMR, 14.5 inch variant. Actually, if I remember right, it's actually 13.7 inches, but it's for those barrel lengths. The regular MR556 handguard actually isn't too bad. To show it here, I actually have it on a different build right now. I know that a few people say it's a little wide. For me, it's comfortable, but something to keep in mind for a lot of people, certainly, because it is kind of an issue I've heard. My biggest issue with this handguard, though, is kind of short. This is about a 12-inch handguard, 12.5 if I'm remembering correctly. And since I wanted the MR556 for home defense, I wanted to mount a light to it, which is obviously doable because this is M-lock, but it was a little bit further back than I would like, so I was getting a lot more shadowing off of the barrel, and if I had put the suppressor on here, I would also get significantly more. So I wanted something that was longer and would bring it out closer to the barrel itself. This handguard, though, the regular M-lock MR series handguard from HK, it's actually extremely rigid. It holds 0 really well, so there's really, if it works for you, there's nothing really wrong with it from that sort of technical standpoint. Another reason I actually went with this Mark 15 handguard was a bit of an interesting story. So, like I kind of mentioned at the start, I was originally doing a G95K 416A7 build here, and the actual handguard that those have is a long HK handguard, which looks something like this. This is the civilian variant, which doesn't have HK going all the way out, but I really wanted one of these handguards, and at the time when I was doing this build, I just could not source these handguards for the life of me. So, just so I would have something that would match the rest of the tanadized build, I picked up this handguard. Now, the reason that I'm still using this Mark 15 rather than this HK, well, actually I was using this HK for about the last month, month and a half, maybe 2 months. And actually my main reason for taking off this handguard was I was heavily considering getting a MAL, putting a IR illuminator on here. And one issue with that, if I were to use this HK handguard, is that I can't really mount anything up here, which is where I would mount it. So I was able to get around that for my light, which I don't have a light head on here right now just because I'm using the same one between these two light bodies and it's on this handguard right now. But I was able to mount a light. I can't really mount anything else unless I maybe did a box illuminator up here, but even then it would get kind of weird. Point is, so I came very close to buying it. I took everything off, reinstalled it on this Mark 15, put it back on here, and then last second I pretty much realized it doesn't really match my use case, because this is strictly a home defense rifle. I'm not using it for anything else at all, so it would just be a significant amount of added weight, especially since I was going to get the MAL, which is probably the heaviest IR illuminator that I'm aware of right now. Other than that, though, this handguard, like I said, it doesn't really have as much usable space as I would like. I would have preferred if they actually did line these front ones with HK. Another reason that I am leaving this Mark 15 on here, for one, just because I'd have to move everything back again, which I don't really feel like doing because it's a lot of effort, and also this actually doesn't color match that well, which somewhat bothered me. This Mark 15 here is actually a really, really good color match with the rest of the rifle, as you can see, whereas this one is significantly darker brown than the rest of the rifle. So just kind of an aesthetic thing right there. I will say, though, that this HK handguard does have a lot of nice features to it. It does have a little cutout, so if you do have a 416A5 gas block, or a clone one like I do, then you can see what gas setting you're on through this window, this little cut there. However, you can't change the gas setting through there, do note that. And also I really like that this actually has a captive cross bolt But this Geissele handguard just uses the older style of HK crossbolt. As for what I have mounted on this handguard, I'm using a bunch of Manta rail covers. I do think they're really comfortable. They kind of have a little bit of a squishy texture to them. They're nice with that. They help to really sink the heat, which isn't really too much of a problem on this rifle with how I shoot it as well, but nice regardless. Using their M-LOK rail guards on the sides here and then their Picatinny cover on the top. For the light itself, I'm using a Cloud Defensive Rain 2.0 with a 100 Concepts cover on here. Using a Phase 5 micro hand stop, which you can see right there. I do like this, especially when it is further out, to just have this little bit of a nub there just to kind of rest my hand against, just to help push the rifle into my shoulder a bit more. Last, like I said, I would talk about the suppressor later in the video, and that is now. So what I'm using here, this is the Sig Sauer SLH 762 Ti suppressor. It is overall an okay suppressor. I will say, however, I don't have any other suppressors right now. I do want to get more to have a better point of comparison, and then in the future I'm also hoping to do an actual review on this, but not before I have something to compare it to. Right now this is my only suppressor. From what I've seen so far though, it's okay on noise reduction. That wasn't really, I wanted just something that would reduce noise. I'm not too hyped up about the exact decibel count or anything like that. It does have a nice lockup on the rifle itself, I will say that, but huge complaint with this is that this sparks up like crazy. This is a titanium suppressor. From what I've read, I guess some titanium suppressors don't have issues with spark up, but this one sparks like crazy. I've tried this on 11-inch barrels, 10.3-inch barrels, this 16.5, and it's no different. There's just a fireworks show every time you use this, and it's not from muzzle flash. It is just actual titanium spark ups, which is pretty annoying. I'm hoping eventually to get either a Huxworks or maybe one of those cat suppressors and putting it on here. I'm just waiting for them to not be on back order, and that's the only reason I haven't gotten one. So hopefully those come back in stock pretty soon. But this is a flow-through reduced back pressure suppressor, as you can see, and it does a pretty good job at that. So like I said, it's okay. It does some of the things I want. It does a few things I don't want it to do. And then I just have it mounted on just a 3-prong flash hider underneath here. That way it's not too crazy with flash if I want to shoot without the suppressor for whatever reason. And I nearly did forget to cover this other build, which I kind of brought up earlier. So what this is, the reason this exists is that after I finished my other main build, I realized I pretty much had enough spare parts for an entire new MR556. So I picked up an HK 416 upper, which if you've seen my other videos, that's why I kind of refer to this as a mashup of MR556 and 416 parts. I don't really know what to actually call it. I usually refer to this as a 416 given that the upper receiver is an actual 416, but point is, I wanted an actual precision rifle. Like I said, the MR556 is a remarkably accurate rifle, mostly because of the barrel. Excellent barrel. So since I took that barrel off of my original one, I just put it onto here and it's good to go. Shoots sub-MOA groups. The good point actually to note that Nefarious Arms barrel, it's usually a little bit over an MOA. As I said, this one is sub-MOA without a doubt. The loss in precision for me wasn't really a concern, like I said, because it's a home defense rifle, but this one is an actual kind of a properly set up precision rifle. So thank you all for watching this build overview on my MR556. I hope that this was enjoyable, hopefully also informative. If you're doing your own MR556 build, hopefully this gave you some food for thought on some parts to look at and what not to look at. The 3 biggest parts I would say that make the biggest difference for a home defense rifle are certainly the chrome lined barrel, adjustable gas block, or really not even necessarily a home defense rifle, but if you're doing suppressed use, having that adjustable NA5 gas block is really nice. And having this different, just an AR-15 lower, does help just for magazine compatibility, which may or may not matter to you depending on what kind of mags you use. If you have any other questions on any of the parts on this, as I said at the start, do check the description because I already did a lot of part-specific videos that really go in depth on a lot of this, but not all. So if you do have any further questions, then by all means, do leave those in the comments below and I'll certainly get back to you on that. Thank you all for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you all in the next one.